Hello, it's Mike Olson, Director of Development for StandUp for Kids Orange County and the host of ListenUp, the StandUp for Kids podcast. On today's episode, we'll be speaking with Johanna Demers, the Outreach Coordinator for StandUp for Kids Orange County, and also a youth who went through our program. We're going to talk to her today about her journey and what's next. Hi, Johanna. How are you?
I'm doing good, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Hey, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself now? So maybe where do you live and what do you do for work?
Okay, so my name is Johanna Demers and I'm 27 years old and I live in Anaheim, California, and I'm the outreach coordinator for StandUp for Kids.
Cool. And how long have you been in that role?
I've been in this role for almost 6 months.
And what do you do? What does that mean? What do you actually do with that job?
So I actually hit the streets. I go and I look for homeless youth and I hand out hygiene kits. I have a coworker who we're a team and we actually go 3 times a week and we try to hit different cities. We go to Irvine, Huntington Beach, Garden Grove, and we just try to look for anybody that is young and that wants help. And we also do community outreach. You know, we call churches, schools, places that we think that we would like to connect and maybe they would need our resources. So that's what I do.
Cool. Is that an easy job? What's that like?
It's definitely not an easy job. The street outreach definitely does hit home sometimes, and it is very hard to see somebody that needs help, and most of the time they don't want it. But if we are able to convince them and if we're able to get them in our program, that's a good day for us. The community outreach definitely, just calling and making sure that everybody knows what we're about and making sure that there's resources that we can offer. Sometimes that's difficult because sometimes people don't want to talk to us. They don't want to answer the phone. They think that we're trying to sell them something. So everything has their ups and downs. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know on some level that experience from my neck of the woods as director of development and trying to get donations and support. So I feel ya. And you, I mean, obviously you, as was mentioned in the intro, so you were in our program actually, so you were a youth in our program, so you have a direct connection to the mission and the work that we do. So that's kind of what I want to kind of get into a little bit with you. So if we can go in the way back machine and just kind of talk about you a little bit. Why don't you tell us like where were you born and what are the first couple, what's the early Johanna life kind of look like?
Okay, so I was born in Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. I am the middle child. I had a pretty, how do I say this? It was a very low income life in Mexico. I remember my parents both had 2 jobs and they were never home. So my older sister, who was the earliest memory that I have was when I was like 5 years old. So my 9-year-old sister used to take care of me and my parents would be gone all the time. It got to the point where I was living got very unsafe and my parents worried about us a lot. So my dad decided to move us to Arizona, the United States. And I think life there became more difficult because we didn't know the language. I was miserable the first several years because I had a hard time learning the language. My parents both had 2 jobs each, and we were always home alone. At that time, my younger brother was born, and not only did my sister have to take care of me, she had to take care of a baby, and I had to help her as well. So it was definitely, my parents tried to give me the best that they could, but it was definitely not an ideal childhood, if that makes any sense.
So in Tijuana, it's you and your older sister and your parents, and they're trying to make ends meet. So that required them to work 2 jobs each, and they're grinding, basically trying to pay the bills.
Yes, definitely. They were definitely grinding. And I remember only seeing my mom on the weekends. And then my dad, I remember seeing him maybe a couple times a week, like physically seeing him um, a couple times a week. And but when they did see us, they're very affectionate and very loving, and they try to like squeeze all that attention that they didn't give us throughout the week in that very day or
Mhm.
that hour. So definitely, they definitely tried their best.
And what was the living situation? So like I think Tijuana like makes you think a thing.
Yeah.
And maybe my perception is not the way it was, or maybe it is, but could you share a little bit about what you remember from living there?
Okay, so I have a, I want to say I have a good memory of how we lived. We used to live in a two-bedroom apartment that the apartments were really, they were not really taken care of. They were really bad. I remember the paint was chipping off. I remember my dad put in an extra lock on the door because he didn't think we were safe when we were alone. I remember, and this is a horrible memory that I have, that one time the apartments caught on fire, and they had an extra lock, and my sister couldn't open it, and we were stuck, and the kitchen was on fire. The kitchen and the living room, they were on fire, and thankfully the neighbors were able to come and help us get out, but it was really bad. It was the living situation, and after that, we had to go live with some family members because obviously they didn't have insurance, and they still had to keep working. But that's one of the worst memories I have from living in Mexico. That we almost died in a fire. So yeah, and
Okay.
it was because of the kitchen or the electricity hadn't been checked and the wires. It was just the apartments were falling apart. So they definitely did not keep up maintenance. So that's why they caught on fire.
Okay. And there was a little bit of like your parents didn't feel like a safe environment either. Um,
No, it didn't. Before the fire, my mom, the little time that she used to spend with us, she used to take us on walks throughout the apartment complex. And when one day when we were going on a walk, we actually saw somebody get shot, and that person ended up dying. So I remember my mom picking me up like a baby because I was a very small child, and grabbing my sister by the hand and just running to our apartment, running. And like she ended up calling my dad. My dad couldn't make it because he was in like at work, and he was really far. So he told my mom to just barricade us in our bedroom and put furniture and just wait for us there. And that's what we did.
hmm,
That's what we did. We ended up having to wait. I don't know how long. I can't. Like as a kid, you don't know the time, but I do remember that it was a while before my dad was able to go, and he just. I remember him talking to my mom saying this wasn't safe anymore. There was always people getting their cars broken into. There was always like kids getting hurt or getting kidnapped. I remember seeing a baby get kidnapped. That's one of my last memories of Mexico. An infant got ripped away from the mom's arms, and the cops were chasing the woman that like took the baby, and my mom was freaking out. We were on the bus, and she was like holding on tight to us, and she was freaking out, and she like told me to not let go of her. She told my sister to not let go of her. But I remember that's one of my last memories that I have of Mexico. I remember that lady running, and the baby had a blue onesie on, and she had stole the baby from the mom. It was horrible. So my parents were definitely not. They didn't want to raise us there anymore. It was a really really bad area, and it's Tijuana, so it's everybody knows it's one of the top 10 world's most dangerous cities. So
so
yeah.
so then your parents get to a point where they've had enough, or they fear for their family's lives and they needed to
Mhm.
make a change. and they decided to go to Arizona. Um,
Yes.
and that's like 20 years ago, maybe. It's like
Yeah, I was
one.
20, I believe it was 21, 22 years ago because I was still very young. And yeah, my dad left first. My dad came over here to the States first. And then he sent somebody for us. And we lived in Baltimore. We lived in St. Louis. And
Wait,
then,
where did you live
yes,
first?
we lived in Baltimore.
So okay, so the first stop was Baltimore from
The first,
Tijuana. So that seems pretty,
yes,
that's like as far away as you can get from Tijuana in the US.
yes.
So what was the impetus for Baltimore? Do you know?
So my father, his older brother, um, lived there. And when my dad realized that the city was getting really more dangerous than what it was, he ended up calling a lot of his family members that lived in the States. And his brother was like, you know what? Why don't you just come here to Baltimore? I have my house and you guys can live in a room until you can get on your feet. And yeah, I'll help you out. So my uncle, he ended up helping my dad get over to Baltimore first, and then they were able to send for us. So yeah, that's where I lived first in Baltimore.
Was there any issues with the border at that point? You just drive across, or how was that like?
Um, it was really bad. I remember we had to cross the border, like in the desert,
Like
and
sneak
it was
gun?
yes, it was my mom, my older sister, myself, and a group of other people. And my mom ended up paying these two really nice guys to carry me most of the way because I was little, I didn't want to walk for miles and miles and miles. So they she ended up paying them and they were helping her take like carry me, but it was like really bad. We got caught two times. I remember that I was really dehydrated and just it was really really bad. The second time that we were caught, my mom actually told my dad that she couldn't do it, and that she was fearing for our lives. She said that I was really dehydrated the last time that we tried to cross. My sister didn't want to walk anymore. And honestly, like after that, we lived in a hotel for a month at the border. And I'm not even going to lie to you, Michael, like I don't even know how we got here, like specifically. I just know we drove in a car.
So
So
it's
after the two tries, so after two tries over the through the desert, they kind of were like, okay, this is not a good idea. Like the girls are not going to handle this. So I don't know. We were able to get in a car. We were able to cross normally.
okay. Wow. But yeah, so do you remember getting caught? Like was it the border agents like with guns that like stop, freeze at the middle of the night? Like what was that like?
Yes, it was. It was not in the middle of the night. It was actually in the middle of the day, and I remember that the group that we were with, one of the guys was my dad's cousin, and that guy, his job was to take care of us. So I remember when they yelled that the immigration was coming, I got pushed into a bush, and a splinter actually got impaled into my forehead. And when you're in Mexico and you go to school, you hear these horrible stories about immigration officers. So obviously, as a 5-year old, I'm thinking that they're gonna take my mom away from me and my sister. So I'm screaming, kicking. My sister's screaming and kicking. My mom's trying to make us calm down. And then a white officer started speaking Spanish to us, and he was like, "Hey, like, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm not gonna kill you. I'm not gonna take your mom away from you." In Spanish, like clear as day. And he actually took the splinter out and he wiped the blood off and he put a band-aid on and he gave me a lollipop. And then my mom was like, "Why were you screaming?" And she was like, "I thought they were gonna kill you and take me away." And it was just horrible. She was like, "No, like they're just gonna send us back to Mexico." And yeah, we actually got put in a jail cell, and they were trying to take us away from my mom. but my mom would not let go of us. And she was like, I will scream, I will kick, but you're not going to take my daughters away. And they didn't. They actually left us. So at 5 years old, I was sitting in a jail cell because we got caught by immigration. Um, that's when we ended up getting deported, and we went to a hotel. My mom had enough money to pay for, I believe, a month. And that's when she told my dad, hey, like the girls cannot handle this. Like it's too much stress. I was dehydrated. I was really sick at that time too. I was very weak. And she didn't have enough money to take me to the doctor. So she was really scared for us. So my dad was like, okay, we got to come up with a new plan. And we stayed there for a month, and we crossed in a car. I remember I got put in a car, and then we came here to California, and my godparents received us here. We stayed here for, I believe, a week, and then my mom showed up because they ended up separating us. And then we got on a plane and went to Baltimore.
So
Yeah.
they separated you to get you across in a whatever, that was the best way to do it, to get you over.
Yes, I don't know the logistics of it. Again, I was 5 years old, so nobody's gonna be explaining anything to a 5-year-old. But I just remember that I got a little power pack, backpack, and they put toys in there, and they told me to hold on to my sister's hand and not to let go of it. I remember that I got put in a car. And they told me to put my seatbelt on, and then they gave us candy to make us like not be all nervous. Who gives candy to a 5-year-old to not make them nervous? I don't know, but they gave me candy. I remember it was a Hershey's chocolate bar. And they told me to relax and just talk to my sister and just have a conversation like any all day. My sister obviously understood more than I did, and she was visibly nervous. And we were able to get across. I don't know how long it took. I don't remember how long it took, but the lady that was driving us, because I remember it was a lady, she dropped us off at a McDonald's, and my godfather and my godmother were waiting for us. So,
wow.
And then we stayed at their house, which my godfather is my mom's brother. So obviously there was definitely trust there. And then I don't know if it was a week, but for me it felt like a week. I'm definitely a mama's girl, and I definitely was a mama's girl when I was younger too. So for me it felt like an eternity. It probably was a couple of days that my mom showed up. So we were all together again.
And this is in San Diego County somewhere.
Yes, we ended up actually going to Buena Park. That's where their house is at, Buena Park. Yes, that's where my godparents live. So I ended up in Buena Park in Orange County at 5 years old. So, and then I don't know how long it was after that we got put in on a plane. My godfather took us to the airport. He went to go seat us all the way in the plane, and then at the airport we got off, and my mom walked us all the way out. They told her not to look at the immigration officers. They told her not to make eye contact with them. And then we went on top of a parking structure, and my dad was with his arms out waiting for us and crying because we hadn't seen him in months.
That's crazy. But you're able to get on a plane in that situation, so you had the documents somehow that got you on the plane and off the plane.
Yes, we did. I don't know how that worked out, but we did. And it was before 9/11, so obviously
it was different.
Airport, yeah, it was very different. It was very different. So yeah, we were able to get on an airplane, and my dad was waiting for us on top of a parking structure, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the look that he had in his face. So it was definitely a family reunion.
Oh, that's heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a whatever, I have a little girl who's almost 3, and like just to like put myself in your dad's like place for 5 seconds is like, oh, can't even imagine.
I don't think it was a good feeling to be away from his family, and it was definitely very hard for him. But yeah, that's when we arrived in Baltimore, and I believe again, I was very young. I didn't have any how to remember time, but we were there for, I believe, several months. We were living there, and they were going to enroll us into the schools. They were going to just try to build a life there, but the crime started kind of escalating. My dad noticed that the crime in Baltimore, so obviously not the best place to have a family. So they started looking for another option, and my dad has a lot of family here in the States, and so does my mother. So they just started calling people, and one of his cousins told him to come to St. Louis, Missouri. And we lived there. And again, I didn't know the language. And I used to have a friend, and we used to communicate by making like hand signals. I remember her. I don't remember her name, but that's when we used to live in St. Louis. And they decided that they didn't want to stay there because they were pregnant with my brother already. So they started calling family again. And my mom's brother was like, hey, I can get, my dad's name is Ernesto. I can get Ernesto a job here, and just come and have your baby here, and I'll help you guys out. So that's how we got to Phoenix, Arizona.
Were you in school at all in Baltimore or St. Louis?
No.
So what were your days like? Your days were just hanging out with your mom at the house?
Yeah, it was just hanging out with my sister and my mom. And in St. Louis, I had made a friend, so we would go and play outside. It was like a small apartment complex. And my mom would sit outside because obviously you're in a new country, you don't trust anybody. So she would sit outside and she would watch us play. Um, my dad was working, I think he was doing roofing at the time. So he was gone during the day all the time. And yeah, we just would hang out. I would watch my friend go to school every day. And when she would come home from school, she would come and look for me. We would go play, and we would catch fireflies and just like all that type of stuff. So yeah.
But you're still 5 or 6 and you can't speak English, and this is an English speaking person, and
Mhm.
giggles and sign language.
Yes. Yes, and we used to watch Clifford the Big Red Dog, the cartoon, and she would try to explain to me what was going on. And it was like just such a cool time. It was like a really, really cool time because she was such a good friend to me and to my sister as well. And she would try to teach us stuff. Her mom had a family member that knew how to speak Spanish, so they were really good. They were really nice to my mom. It was just like a really good experience overall. But yeah, it was a really good friendship. We used to just talk with signals, and she would like point at something and like say its name, and she would make me repeat it. And yeah, it was a really good time. It was definitely, she was definitely a good girl. That girl, I can't remember her name for the life of me, but she was a good person.
Okay, so then you get to Phoenix, and so it sounds like you were in Phoenix for a big chunk of time after that. So you settled in Phoenix, and
Yeah.
that's where life happened for quite a while.
Yes, it definitely did. That's where we got enrolled into school. I started first grade there. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to speak English. I didn't know anything. So within 6 months, I believe, I was speaking English because obviously you're little and you learn fast when you're little. And my little brother was born, and yeah, that's how life went on for a while. My parents were able to rent a house. My dad was still working a lot. He was gone a lot of the time. And my mom just took care of the three of us. So me and my sister would go to school, come back. My little brother was there already. So yeah, and then they were able to rent an apartment. My dad had a good job. He started working. He had a day job and a night job as well. Um, and then the apartment got too small for us, and then my dad was able to purchase a house. So all their hard work, they were able to purchase a house finally. I believe I was 10 when they were able to purchase a house. But obviously with the house, a mortgage payment comes and insurance and bills. So they both started working. and they both started working a lot again. And then again, they were rarely home. And it was like if we were in Mexico again. We was just the three of us. So yeah, that's where I think I went down the wrong path when you're barely going into your teenage years, and I feel like at that time you need the attention of your parents, and when you don't have it, you try to do whatever you can to get that attention. So
Uh, how
that's
uh,
where
how far apart was your brother? What's the age difference between you and your brother?
I'm 8 years older than my brother.
8 years older than your brother. Okay, got it.
So yeah, it's a
And
big gap, and my sister's 5 years older than I am.
okay, gotcha. So
Yeah, so we're
what
separated.
what was safety? Was it safe in Phoenix? Did you live in like? Did you feel safe at home, or what was that kind of feel?
Um, I mean, it was it was the United States, so obviously everybody's like, oh my God, the states are it's so peaceful and safe. You can leave your door unlocked, and you can, your kids can play outside, but obviously being alone all the time, we weren't able to play outside as much as we wanted to. We had to stay inside the house, and we had to help my mom with the little baby that we had to take care of. Um, that house had a pool, so we had to make sure that he didn't get out and, God forbid, drown. And yeah, it was definitely not a lot of kid activities was going on, but I was definitely safe, and I definitely thought that that's how life was, and yeah.
Okay. Um, okay, so then we make some bad decisions or start getting into trouble, something like that. Do you remember?
Um,
Do you remember like a first incident or a thing or a something that like sticks out to you?
Yes. So so this. Let me paint you a picture, right? My sister's obviously 5 years older than I am. So when I was 11, she had met a guy. She was 16. She had met a guy that she fell head over heels for him, and she decided that she wanted to get married. Obviously, when you're 16, you can't get married. You need your parents to sign a paper to get married, and my parents are Hispanic, so they believe and their customs that a woman should marry very young. So they signed the paper.
Hmm.
But that marriage was a really bad and dark time for my sister. So they were really preoccupied with her. Her husband ended up being very abusive and very controlling. So while they were working two jobs, dealing with my sister, making sure that the baby was okay, I was a shadow. I was not in anyone's radar. I was able to get away with a lot. And one day in school, my friends, they were like, hey, we're going to go somewhere after school. I don't remember where we were going to go eat something. I was like 11 or 12. And I called my mom and I told her that I had to stay after. And all the stuff they were dealing with, my mom didn't pay any mind to it. So she said yes. And that's the first time I smoked weed. That's the first time I smoked weed. We smoked weed behind an alley out of an apple. And that was my first encounter with drugs. I was 11 years old.
Did you feel cool?
I felt like I was on top of the world. I'm not even gonna lie to you, Michael. Like I felt like then my parents weren't paying attention to me. I felt like I was like the cool, sneaky kid that can get away with murder. I felt like, oh, this is like my new thing. My parents are never gonna know. Like I was just on a different level of dumb. But I felt very cool at the time.
Okay. And all your friends were in the same boat with you. They were drinking the same Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so yeah, that's pretty much, I felt really cool after that.
So you kept doing it because it was the thing to do.
Yes,
Um,
I definitely kept smoking weed, and I found out that my window didn't lock properly, and my sister was pregnant at the time, so they were occupied with her trying to get her away from her abusive husband and just trying to go with that. My little brother was like 4 at the time, or 3, and he was getting sick all the time, like to the point where he had to be hospitalized, and I was just by myself all the time. And I was able to crawl through my window, and I was able to close the window from the outside, and I would go to parties. I would dress like if I was older, and I would go to parties and I would drink and smoke weed. And
how do you find a party when you're 12?
I had older friends, and I had high school friends at the time. I don't even know how I ended up with high school friends, but I did.
Yeah, how do high school friends hang out with 12-year-olds?
Well, I always wore makeup to school, so I looked older. And then we used to, like in Arizona, in the public schools, I don't know if it's so much here. My husband tells me that it's not really like a custom here, but in Arizona, you wear uniforms. You have to wear uniforms. So I would just wear like a regular shirt on the under my uniform, and I would just take it off after school, and I would wear like some jean shorts or like a skirt under whatever pants or shorts like my mom had put me in that day. And I would just take them off, and I would look like a regular 15-year-old or 16-year-old.
All right.
Yeah.
Um, so then presumably that was fun for a while and you were just
Mm-hmm.
having a good time with it. When did was there a time where it went from good to not so good?
My, I don't know if you ever heard, like, obviously, the fun ends, right? Mine lasted years.
Hmm.
I was able to hide obviously my addiction to alcohol at that time, because I had to drink every single weekend, and then it got to the point where I was sneaking my dad's beers. And it got to the point where I was sneaking his beers. I had drugs on me, which weed at the time, and I was able to go to the backyard and smoke weed, and nobody would notice because they would just be like, "Oh, the smell's coming from a neighbor or something," and they weren't home. So you come in, you take a shower, you make sure the smoke like smell is off of your body, and you're good. Your parents are not paying attention to you. So my stretch actually lasted until I was 21.
Hmm.
Yes. So from 11 years old, they did not catch me until I was 21 years old.
That's interesting. That's
Yes.
that's im-
So
it's impressive, maybe. It's probably not the best word, but
it's
um
definitely not the best word, but it was impressive.
um well, so you probably don't know this about me, but I don't know if I was 12, but I'm from Wisconsin. So
Mhm.
in the winter, especially, there's not a whole lot to do in Wisconsin. So drinking, I mean, in the Midwest, I think in general, drinking and weed and other things is not uncommon. So what's interesting to me is I know a lot of people I mean, I was drinking beer. I was still taking alcohol from my parents as a teenager too. Same
Mhm.
to you. I never smoked weed, but I know plenty of people that did. Um, so I've snuck out when I was young. I put pillows in my bed to represent my body to make it look like I was still there. Like I did a lot of dumb stuff too. So I can definitely empathize with that. Um, so it's interesting. It's interesting to like that might sound like what you're saying might sound like crazy and preposterous, but it's normal for certain demographics
Yeah.
to do stuff like that. And then I don't know, there doesn't need to be like really harsh consequences to that necessarily. Like I think it's just being a kid on some level and like seeing what you can get away
No,
with.
definitely not.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and I was able to get away with a lot more than what I should have. And my parents were strict.
hmm.
When I tell you my parents were strict, I'm telling you, I had a curfew. I had a bedtime. Um, I was not allowed to watch certain shows. I was not allowed to watch certain movies. I wasn't allowed to talk. Very respectful towards my parents. Um, I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend until I was 18. Like a lot of stuff that it's just like, how did I end up like this?
So
I really,
I have a question though. So
yeah.
your sister got to get married when she was 16, but you didn't get to have a boyfriend until you were 18?
They changed the rule. Yeah, that's what I was saying too. They changed the rules after her little um shenanigans went through, and they were like, "Oh, we got to change the rules because we let her have a boyfriend at 16. She ended up getting married and he turned out to be very abusive. We don't want this to happen to her as well."
That makes
So
sense.
they actually did.
So they
Yeah, they
learned.
changed.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they changed the rules. And so I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend until I was 18, but I wasn't occupied with having a boyfriend. I was out having fun. What I thought what my concept of fun was getting drunk and smoking weed. And my smoking weed and drinking turned very fast into meth. It turned extremely fast. I don't even think I realized how fast until I'm talking about it now as a person that's sober. I don't think I never really thought about how fast I turned from drinking to smoking weed to smoking and injecting crystal meth. So I know who offered it to me and I know why they offered it to me. And I, there's sometimes I do wish that I can go back and be like, no, I don't want any, but I didn't, so I can't live in the what ifs. And yeah.
So, so I want to just, so your parents are very strict and they're trying to be good parents and keep you out of trouble and keep you on the straight and narrow. And as far as they know, they are doing that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
They
That's,
just, you were really good at being deceptive and
mm-hmm.
escaping and sneaking out. And they trusted you that you were doing what you said you were doing. So there's a little bit of like living a double life, uh,
Yeah.
the prim and proper mode, and then the other mode, which again, I think everybody has that in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know, like movies, like gory movies. You don't necessarily watch gory movies with your parents because, or whatever the thing is, you censor yourself to some level with everybody you hang out with. And so you're doing
Yes.
that with your parents just on a really, um, in a major way, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a major way. And definitely I wasn't getting caught. So I was like, this is working.
Okay, so then you said so you said two things. One was that you were on the ride the ride was going well until you were 21, and then you also said meth snuck up on you or caught up to you or surprised you. So did both of those things happen at 21?
No, I started doing meth when I was 13.
13. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So meth didn't have any re- uh, adverse things until 21 either. So you were riding that
Uh,
train just fine.
so the meth came and somebody was smoking it in front of me and I would see that person smoke it all the time at parties. And then I don't want to say that I started dating him, but we became like a thing. And he would sell drugs, and I would see him get high, and obviously, um, he was older than I am, and I was lying and saying that I was older. So he was like, "Oh, I don't want my girlfriend to smoke meth," and I was like, "First of all, I'm not your girlfriend. I just want to try it out, because I just want to. Everybody's doing it, so I just want to try it out because I still want to be the cool kid." And it was me nagging and nagging, like me nagging, trying to do meth. But it was one day where he was like, "Okay, here you go, you can try it." And I tried it, and it was an every single weekend thing where I would smoke meth. And smoking meth, you don't really notice somebody smoking meth in the beginning because all they want to do is sleep. And my parents are gone all the time, so I'm sleeping all the time when I'm not getting high during the week. And in the weekend, I'm like up and just up, you know? But they would work and I would not be at home. And my sister was oblivious. She was back at home, and my little brother was a little kid, so he didn't realize what was going on. And I think that I was able to hide it because my parents would never believe that I would do anything bad. So they had this perception of me where she's a really good girl. Um, and she's not going to do anything bad. But I was like horrible. I was doing horrible in school. I could not pass like any, like, I couldn't like get anything above a D. Like I was just barely passing by like a hair. So they weren't calling my parents, and every report card I would like hide it or forge their signature. I was saying that I had after school activities, but I was smoking weed and drinking like on a freaking alley with like a bunch of people. And they had this idea of me being a really good kid, and I wasn't. I really wasn't a good kid. So yeah.
I mean, so all right, I'm gonna put my hat on again and my parenting hat, and um what you're saying is like scary as a parent to be like, all right, I got a kiddo. I want the best for them. I'm gonna lay down some rules and try to raise a good kid, set the table. I'm gonna, try to do everything I can to make sure things go well and they're successful, and they got a bedtime and they eat right and get good. The grades thing I will be pretty diligent about, I think. So trying to think like, all right, would you have fooled me if I was your dad? Is kind of what like it makes me think. And I would like
Yeah.
to know, but hard to say.
Yeah.
I feel like parent teacher conferences might be a situation where you could get busted.
Well, my parents didn't know how to speak English. You
Hmm.
got to remember that. My parents didn't know how to speak English. So they could come to a teacher conference and the teacher can be very like disappointed and all that. But I can tell them whatever I want because I'm the one who's translating. I had tricks for everything, Michael.
Yeah.
Tricks for everything.
Well, and just the fact
And
that they had to work a lot to pay the bills,
yeah,
and
yes.
there's so many, like your sister and then your little brother, and they had so many things to keep them occupied.
Yeah. And then it got to the point where, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh, the middle child syndrome doesn't exist. It does exist. And I felt a lot of it. I felt like I wasn't getting attention. I felt like my parents didn't love me like they loved their firstborn and their only boy. And in a Hispanic family, the boy is very important, to have that boy. So I felt like I was at a place most of my childhood. And I feel like it caught up to me. And I felt obviously, I do believe that addiction and alcoholism is a disease because it does run in both sides of my family. But again, we're Hispanic, so that doesn't exist. Mental health problems don't exist. You drink too much, well, only guys should do that. Or if you drink too much, just stop drinking. And that didn't work for me. that didn't work for me. And I feel like sometimes I was trying to get back at my parents for not paying attention to me. But it wasn't that. It was, I had a full blown addiction to drugs and alcohol. And it's a disease that I discovered the first time I smoked weed. So I think it was definitely, it runs in my family. So it was like going to happen at some point if I ever did weed or something like that, you know? So I don't know. I like to think like that sometimes when I, feel really bad about the stuff I did. So yeah.
Okay, so then you said you rode the train really nicely until you were 21. So can
Yes.
you go like what happened at 21?
So at 21, let me just paint you a picture. At 21, I was divorced already. I had to come back home. I had already run away once. I got married when I was 18, divorced by the time I was 19. Ran away when I was 19. Came back. I tried to finish school because I had dropped out of high school. And I started working. And, my parents were very disappointed that I dropped out of school. And I started getting these really odd jobs and really bad jobs. And I ended up getting a job. I don't know what you guys call them here, but they are always busting them. They're called gambling cafes. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
I can picture what that might be, but I don't really get it.
Yeah, they just did a raid here in Garden Grove. They just caught a location, but it's these it's like a club, not like a club, but it's like a computer cafe. But in the computers, they have casino games, and those are illegal. So those places usually have drugs involved. There's usually a bunch of people like that have been up for days that are on meth, and a lot of people that are on heroin, nodding out on the computer. So I used to work in one of those, and I used to have the night shift.
And
So
sorry, question for you. And do
mhm.
they actually pay out? Like if you give Joanna money and she gives you some chips to put into your computer account, and then if you have when you cash out, then Joanna gives you money and then you leave. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, it pays out like a regular casino, but we're uh, essentially you're stealing from the tribes, which are where the casinos are usually at.
Yeah.
So that's illegal. That's not okay for you to do. So I would be like in this office, and I would have a computer system, and they would give me money, and they would be like, "Oh, can you put $20 on this computer?" And I would be like, "Yeah, let me look up your name." So I would like look up their name, put money on charge their computer, and they would just like play, and they would just be there all day, just putting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And then when people would win, I used to have a tip jar, and they would put tips in there, and I used to make really good tips actually. And yeah, I worked there for a long time, and then one of them got raided, and then the owner of the place that got raided opened another one, so I worked at another one. And my drug addiction was spiraling out of control. It was just, I was getting high every single night because I used to work in the night and I used to sleep all day, so my parents wouldn't notice.
Hmm.
So I was getting high every single night, and I was working at the cafes. So I was making my money, and I had my car, and I just went downhill from there.
Uh,
It really did.
so
Go ahead. Sorry.
you you said you made it till 21 like really smooth, but then you mentioned that you got married and divorced at 18 and 19. So that seems like a pretty, I don't know where marriage fits in like the scope of big things in life, but that's like a pretty big thing.
Well, my parents were like, get married. I was 18, again, let's go back to the whole culture thing. And, my parents are older. They're almost in their 60s. So they're very much set in the old fashioned culture. And my mom told me one day, she was like, you need to get married. You need to get married soon. You're getting older. And I was like, I'm 18. I just turned 18. But I had met a guy and he was older than me. He was like a couple years older than me. And my parents had met him. They liked him. Blah, blah, blah. And he was like, hey, you want to get married? Just out of nowhere. And I was like, sure. But I saw it as, my parents saw it like, oh, finally she's gonna get married, you know. I saw it as, oh, I get to do drugs whenever I want to because I get to be in my own home away from my parents, and I get to get high whenever I feel like it.
And I don't have to sneak around anymore. I can just be me and do what I want to do.
Yeah, so pretty much. But what I didn't know, and what I didn't know at the time, was that my then husband was going to turn into a very abusive person, and he was going to sell drugs on the side. He was going to get to the point of physically abusing me. And it was just a really bad marriage. It was a horrible time in my life where I constantly used, and my using I used even more. But it was him coming home and beating me up. And it was just a really, really bad time in my life. I used to work, I was trying to go back to school, and he was very controlling. He was very abusive, and it was just horrible. It was a horrible time. So that's when I think that my using became even worse. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm not, like, my parents never hit me in their life. Like, I'm not gonna let this guy hit me. Um, and I left. Like, I was like, I'm gone. And my dad was like, oh my God, you can't leave your husband. Oh my God, what are people gonna say? You're gonna be divorced. Oh my God, like, and I was like, I don't care. I was like, I finally told him, I was like, he's hitting me. And my dad was like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me? Blah, 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 and this and that. And I was getting high, so that's why I didn't tell them. I prefer my drugs than actually getting out of an abusive relationship and going back to my parents. So
Yeah.
that's how bad my drug addiction was at that point, that I preferred drugs over my own safety. So I ended up getting divorced. It was super quick because we didn't have, I think we had a car under both of our names. And I was like, you know what, you can keep the car. I don't want the car. The house that we had was under his name. My dad was like, fight for it. I was like, no, I'm good. And I just called it a day. And that was like probably one of the worst years, one of the few worst years of my life.
And that was like a 1 year. That was 18 to 19 and all that
Yes.
happened. And then did you
Yes.
move
That was.
you move back in with your parents then after that?
Mm-hmm.
So if I put my dad hat back on and my daughter tells me that her husband is beating her up, I'm gonna want to kill that guy.
Yes, my parents actually wanted to like press charges, and my dad wanted to beat him up. Him and my then brother-in-law wanted to beat him up, and I was like, why? Like, he's a little man. Like, he has this little man complex. Just let him be. I was just over it. I just wanted to go home and get my routine going up again. So I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to get my routine of using up again. That was my problem. So they wanted to do like a bunch of stuff to him, and I was just not cooperating. So they couldn't press charges. They couldn't beat him up. They just couldn't do anything. So my dad wanted to kill him at some point. I was like, you need to relax, broski. Like, calm down.
But so they still didn't know anything about drugs though, even through that situation.
Nope. They were not aware. And my ex-husband tried to tell my dad that I was using drugs, but my dad was like, no, she's not. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I was like, even like, I remember even telling them, like, you can drug test me. Like, I'm not on drugs, knowing damn well that I was like high in the moment. So, yeah, it was definitely getting to a point where it was really bad.
Okay. And then the gaming venue comes into play, and you're surrounding yourself with a bad crowd once again.
Yes.
So what happens from there? This is the end of part 1 of the Johanna podcast. Stay tuned next week for the part 2 and the conclusion. Thank you for listening today to Listen Up, the Stand Up for Kids podcast. A big thank you to Gabby Villarreal and Billy Huynh for their production and editing support. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Click here to watch more. Please also consider a donation to help getting kids off the streets using the link below. 92 cents out of every dollar donated goes directly to supporting these kids. I'm your host, Michael Olson, Director of Development at Stand Up for Kids Orange County. Thanks for listening and have a great day.